Alrighty, welcome on back everyone to episode 17 of the All Aussie Rules Footy podcast. We're here for ANZAC Day weekend football. This is part 1 of the preview round. There's going to be an extra episode this week just due to the fact that there's so many games early in the week. So this is part 1 of the preview. We'll have part 2 coming out on Friday. But yeah, we'll have a quick run through what we're planning on looking at this match. First up, we'll have a look at the latest news. Then we'll jump into my power rankings going into round 7 of the season. And then we'll have a preview of the first 4 matches of the weekend. So that's Wednesday night's game, the 2 Thursday games, and then the Friday night game. The remaining 5 games after that will all be previewed in Friday's episode. And then we'll finish this one with all 9 of my round 7 tips as they stand at the current point. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, all the normal stuff. Check me out on all my socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above. We'll jump straight in from there. Latest news. 3 tribunal hearings have been had. 2 failed, 1 was successful, and to be honest, the one I thought was no chance to be successful managed to get away with it. So Jesse Hogan is free to play somehow. Apparently swinging and getting lucky and not fully knocking someone out is fine. So swing away, people, swing away. Toby Green's out for a week. He was unsuccessful, which, look, I think it deserves possibly a week anyway, but I thought he might have got off. And Paras for West Coast, he is also unsuccessful and will be missing this weekend's clash. Nothing else too exciting other than it's Anzac Day weekend. Great weekend of football. There's some very good games. Most of the way through the weekend. I don't have too high hopes of tonight's game, but Bombers Collingwood is always a big game, always a good game, pretty close most of the time. GWS Brisbane potentially could be okay. Hopefully we'll see a better Brisbane than we saw last week. We'll jump straight into power rankings from there. And to be honest, I had a lot of trouble with this week's power rankings. As always, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. But North Melbourne, I have them sitting last. They had a battle of the bottom last week against Hawthorn, and they were very much outmanned across that game, so they stay in 18th. Hawthorn, they got the win against North Melbourne, so they stay 17th. That's certainly not good enough to move up. West Coast, they got their second win in a row. They're sitting in 16th. Are they better than Richmond? Maybe. I couldn't justify putting them up to 15th just yet, but hey, another win in the next couple of weeks will certainly see them move up. Richmond, they had the bye, they stay 15th. Adelaide copped a loss at home again, this time to Essendon, so they dropped down to 14. Gold Coast, while not terrible, they got comfortably beaten by Sydney. They dropped down to 13th. St Kilda got absolutely smashed by the Doggies, so they dropped down to 12th. This is the section of the power rankings that I had the most trouble with. Bulldogs, last week, the way they played would be higher, but it's still in my mind that the week before they played Essendon and were atrocious. So they do move up 3 spots, but they stay in only up to 11th. Essendon reaches season high 10, which is a good time to be moving up going into Anzac Day. They were very good. They got the chocolates against Adelaide. Brisbane, they lost to Geelong. I think a lot of their play was good enough. They were competitive enough. On Saturday night, they just weren't good enough to take the take the win against Geelong, and I think the margin probably is worse than it probably should have been. They kicked 4 goals, 13. Fremantle, this is the one that I want to move them down further, but Brisbane lost, so I couldn't warrant them going up, and I thought, I just don't know if Essendon are top 8 at the moment. Maybe they are, but if Essendon win this week, they'll be top 8 hands down. 7th is Collingwood. They got a very good win against Port Adelaide. Melbourne, they drop a spot down to 6th, even though they had the bye, just due to the fact that Sydney did enough to move up to 5th. Port Adelaide, they lost to Collingwood. They weren't terrible, but they are beginning to look a little bit like flat track bullies. They did that most of last year and so far this year, but hopefully they can get a big scalp in the coming weeks and fill us with a bit of confidence. Carlton, they were very good. They beat GWS. They move from 4th to 3rd. Geelong, they remain undefeated. I've got them 2nd. GWS, even though they lost, I don't think they were bad enough to drop them from top spot. Obviously, they are missing who likely is probably the best tall defender in the league. So they were always probably going to struggle against the talls of Carlton. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they go next time against Carlton if Taylor is playing. So that's my power rankings after round 6. Not overly happy with some of the positions of some teams. I think the top 7 are the top 7. I think the next, probably Fremantle down to St Kilda, could all finish 8 to 12. And then Gold Coast could probably be the bottom levels of that. Adelaide aren't showing enough, and then the bottom 4 is how I see it at the moment. So we'll jump into our first match of the weekend, which is tonight, if you're listening to this when it goes live, Wednesday evening at 7:25. If you're not listening to it this evening, then maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was a couple of days ago, but this will be Wednesday evening, Richmond-Melbourne for their traditional Anzac Day Eve game. I'm not exactly sure how many of these we've had now, but it's best part of 10 years, I believe. And as you can see, it's Richmond in 16th and struggling against the Demons, who are 6th on the ladder and coming off the bye last. Well, both teams are coming off the bye last week, but Melbourne probably looked like they needed the bye 2 weeks ago, so that will be helpful for them. Record between these two teams, they played twice last year. Melbourne took them both. Won't say convincingly, but convincingly enough. And then the year before, Melbourne won that one as well. In fact, it's been quite a while since Richmond won. The last time they beat them was round 5, 2020. So Melbourne have won the last 4 meets between these two teams. Differences in play style aren't. I mean, Melbourne's defence is very, very good. That's second least amount of points scored against them on an average, whereas obviously Richmond struggle offensively, they struggle defensively, and to be honest, they struggle in most areas. If you look through inside 50 differential, 17th in the league, disposal efficiency 18th in the league, clearance differential 18th in the league. They're right down the bottom rungs of the competition in some key areas. Melbourne's numbers aren't great either, to be honest. Like inside 50 differential 16th, their disposal efficiency is 13th, and their clearance differential is 14th. So the fact that they're 4-2 is mainly due to their defence just holding strong, because in some very important factors of the game they haven't been going that well. I think they will have used the bye well and hopefully come back refreshed and a little bit better. They'll certainly be hoping that it's a completely dry game as well, because they do kind of struggle when it gets a little bit damp underfoot. From what we've seen, there's no way you could probably tip Richmond in this. But I mean, look at last week's results and even the week before. There's been a lot of weird results in football over the last few weeks. I think Richmond are in that bottom 4 teams that just are at a lower level than everyone else. I think overall most of the competition is pretty even, and it just comes down to best preparation, best game plan, and who plays better on the day. But with some of the bottom teams, probably the bottom 4, that's going to be they're a little bit off the pace in my opinion, especially with the amount of injuries and such that Richmond have at the moment. So I'll be on Melbourne in this one, and pretty confidently in that. I think game number 2 of round 7 is the Bombers of the Collingwood in the another traditional Anzac Day game. I think this is number 29 Anzac Day meeting between these two teams, going right back into the 90s, minus the 1 year that they missed, which was 2020, obviously due to COVID. Collingwood have overall the better record in the game. I think it's 18 to 10. But both teams probably go into this pretty confident. Essendon were clearly the better team last week against Adelaide. Only just got the win, but they were definitely better than Adelaide. And Collingwood coming off their best performance of the year against Port Adelaide. So both teams go in probably as confident as they would have been going into any game this year, I reckon. Last year, these two teams met in round 24 and Collingwood won that by 70 points. Wouldn't read too much into that. Essendon had put the Qs in the rack for the year, and Collingwood were looking to try and build some momentum going into finals. So if you go back to Anzac Day, Collingwood turned that one around. They were down by 28 points, either at three-quarter time or just before three-quarter time, before a blitz that we've seen many times from Collingwood over the last couple of years occurred, and they ended up winning by 13 points in what was a massive turnaround in the final quarter. Time before that, Collingwood won that after the siren from Jamie Elliott kicking one from the boundary. I'm sure all Essendon supporters remember that one with great fondness. And Anzac Day that year, 2022, Collingwood got that win as well. That was the day that Guinea kicked 5. So the last time Essendon beat Collingwood was round 23, 2021. In fact, they've won both of their meetings in 2021 quite comfortably both times, but that was obviously pre-Craig McRae era, and since then Collingwood haven't lost to them. So yeah, overall Collingwood probably have the edge on looking on history. Going on what we've seen this year, you'd say both teams are definitely a chance. They're both 3-2 over the last 5 weeks. But we'll see what happens. A lot of the stat categories, they're probably very similar across the board. Like you look at scoring 9th and 7th, opponents scoring 13th and 14th. The one difference here is accuracy. Essendon are 5th and Collingwood are 13th. Essendon were terrible last week kicking at goal, but still they sit 5th in the league, so that shows how good they were going into that. Forward efficiency, Collingwood probably have the better forward. Well, they do have the better forward efficiency. They just don't convert their shots. Inside 50 differential is very similar, 11th, 12th. Disposal efficiency isn't too dissimilar at 10th and 15th. This is the main difference another main difference in favour of Essendon is their clearance work. They do very well in the clearance game, whereas Collingwood do not do so well. They have been better over the last couple of weeks, though, and the tackle differential, top 2 teams in the league. I think Collingwood played the second or first last week in Port Adelaide, but out-tackled them and they've gone up to first, and Essendon moved to second. So I think we'll see a very high intense, high tackling, high pressure game, which you'd expect. Both teams will come into this like it's a final. They'll want to win this one, and it will be whoever does the better with it, who makes the most of their opportunities, because I could see it being very even in a lot of areas. Probably both teams will have similar inside 50s, probably similar shots for the match. It's just going to come down to who kicks the goals and who doesn't. So yeah, that's my thoughts on what should be one of the better Anzac Day games, and they always usually are pretty good. You look at last year, it was 13 points to Collingwood. The year before was 11 points to Collingwood, and then 2021 was a little bit more of a blowout, but not much. Still only 24 points to the Bombers. 2019 was 4 points to Collingwood. So very, like, the last, four Anzac Day games have all been within 4 goals. So I wouldn't expect it to be any dissimilar from that this year. We have a second Anzac Day game this year, which will be Thursday night. Ignore the time I've got on the screen there. It's definitely not at 1:45. I believe it's 7:30, maybe. I could be completely wrong. But the Giants are playing the Lions at Manuka Oval. These two teams did play a couple of days before Anzac Day last year at Manuka Oval, and Brisbane got the win by 21 points. All over the place at the moment. In fact, the last 2 times they've played each other have been at Manuka Oval, and Brisbane have won them both. The time before was by 40 points. GWS have not beaten Brisbane since the semi-final of 2019 at the Gabba. So it's quite a while, and it's 5 meetings since. So all 3 matches that we've looked at so far have all been one of the 2 teams on a bit of a decent streak of 4 or 5 matches in a row won against their opponent. However, this time GWS are the team in form, whereas Brisbane are struggling a little bit. Obviously, GWS are sitting 3rd on the ladder. They went down to Carlton down in Melbourne last week. Brisbane, they're 12th on the ladder. They had a bit of a dogged day up on the Gabba against Geelong in the wet. They just did not perform at all, mainly in front of goal. As you can see that on the screen, their accuracy is 18th in the league. So, and their forward efficiency is 17th in the league. So those 2 stats combined is bad reading for Brisbane, and they get the ball forward enough as like they're the number 1 team at getting it inside 50 compared to their opponent, but they just cannot get shots on goal, and when they do get shots on goal, they tend to be missing them. Obviously, being 4 goals 13 last week was not a stat that would help their accuracy for the year. GWS best offense in the league. Brisbane one of the better defenses in the league. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. GWS across the board, important stats, all very highly ranked outside of clearances, which I have mentioned a few times is not a major concern, because while getting the ball out of the clearances is important, getting the ball forward, it's not the be all and end all. Carlton have lifted last week, but have not dominated clearances at all this year. They've been pretty average. Same with GWS, and they're a combined 10 and 2 between them. Centre clearances is a little bit different than normal clearances. I think centre clearances are very important, because at that point you still have the 666 rule in effect, so you can score a lot easier from a normal clearance than you can, from a centre clearance, than you can from most stoppage clearances, unless obviously it's in a forward 50. Brisbane have not really been tackling great. It'll be interesting to see if they turn that around this week. Will they? I don't know. I want to say that we'll see the best of Brisbane this weekend, because 2 weeks ago I was pretty confident with how Brisbane were going. They obviously played very well in gather round. They then got their second win the week after, and then last week it was almost the fact that they've lost 3 games at the Gabba already this year is a pretty bad sign for where they're at. I think they're not far off. The main thing they need to do is get their forwards going, because they get the ball forward enough. They just can't kick a goal, and they aren't getting the shots once they go forward. So I think that's the main thing they just need to tighten up, because their defense is good enough. They're getting the ball forward is enough. The only things that they really need to work on is their pressure and their ability to score once going forward. Manuka Oval, Thursday night. If we see the best of Brisbane, I think they can show up here. GWS, though, will be pretty keen not to lose 2 in a row. So we'll see how that plays out on Thursday night. Final game that we're going to look at in this episode, obviously I won't be the final game of the round. We'll look at Saturday and Sunday games in the next episode, but Friday night we're heading back to the Adelaide Oval again. I think this is it 4 weeks in a row? Definitely gather around. I think it's 3 or 4 weeks in a row that we've had Friday night footy at the Adelaide Oval. This one, Port Adelaide St Kilda. What do we make of this match? I don't know. Both teams coming off a loss last week. Obviously Port Adelaide going down to Collingwood at the MCG after being 5 goals up in the first quarter is probably slightly disappointing for them. St Kilda, they're coming off a I don't know how to word it, terrible performance is probably the best way to say it, against the Bulldogs last Friday night, or Thursday night, last week. They lost it in the first quarter, 7-1, and they never came back at all from there. So Port Adelaide are sitting 5th on the ladder. They're going along pretty well. They'll be a bit disappointed that their 2 losses have been to Melbourne in Adelaide and Collingwood in Melbourne, so they're not the worst losses, but they do need to start winning some of those games. St Kilda, they've shown some very good signs this year, but unfortunately their last performance was not one that fills anyone with confidence. Differences in teams here. Port Adelaide, number 1 forward efficiency team in the league, as well as the second best inside 50 differential, so that's a sign that they just are very good going forward. They get the ball forward and they get shots on goal, which leads to them being pretty high scoring most games. Across the board, in fact, they're in most stat categories, they're pretty high in the league. Like, tackle differential is very good. I think it dropped from 1st to 3rd last week when Collingwood kind of gave them a bit of a touch up. Clearances differential is solid. Disposal efficiency is very good. So they're going pretty well. St Kilda, they're up and down. Yeah, there's the excuse that last week they'd had 3 games in 11 days or whatever it was, and coming off a 4 or 5 day break, they're a little bit off the pace, and yeah, you can forgive that, but it's not the kind of performance you want to see too often from your team. They need to tighten up a lot of stat categories, in my opinion, if they want to be playing finals. From what I've seen, I think they're going to be 9 to 12th on the ladder, probably. Their best is good. Their game against Collingwood, they were very good, but their bad's not great. I've been impressed with some of their backline players and their wingers. They've been looking good. Obviously Marshall's been very good this year. He was a bit down last week, but I wouldn't say they have no hope in this game. I don't think Port Adelaide lose this. They play Adelaide Oval pretty well. and they play against these teams that are probably like 8th best and down very, very well. They don't lose too many of these over the last couple of years. These two teams going up against each other. Last time they played at Adelaide Oval was all the way back in 2021. So a few years since they did, and Port Adelaide won that one reasonably comfortably. Since then, Port Adelaide have won the 3 meetings since. 2 at Marvel Stadium and 1 at Kazali Stadium. None of them have been blowouts. So last year, Port Adelaide won by 7 points. 2022 at Kazali's, they won by 1 point. And then 2021, the second time they played, Port Adelaide won that one by 13 points at Marvel. So last time St Kilda won was at Adelaide Oval in 2020. They won that one by 29 points. So, in fact, in the last 10 times they've met, St Kilda have only managed the 1 win, which was that 2020 game. So, Port Adelaide probably have the wood over St Kilda, and they're the better team at the moment. So, it's hard to suggest that St Kilda will win this, but strange things happen in football, and you never know. You can never really write it off. I won't be tipping St Kilda because they have fully damaged me after watching them last week when I tipped them to beat the Bulldogs. So, yeah, that's the 4 games we're looking at right now. We'll have another episode with the remaining 5 games coming up on Friday. We'll quickly run through my tips for the 9 matches, all 9 matches. And yeah, first up, we got Richmond-Melbourne on Wednesday night. Melbourne should be too good for Richmond in this one. Both teams coming off the bye, so that's no factor. And Richmond just struggling with injuries. Melbourne should win this even without Richmond's injuries, but the fact that there is so many just pushes the needle further towards Melbourne. Anzac Day, I can see going either way. I would not be confident either team winning this. I think the best of Collingwood is better than the best of Essendon, but this is Anzac Day. Anything can happen. So I'm not hugely confident either way, but I will be tipping Collingwood just based on the fact that I truly believe their best is better than Essendon's best at the moment. GWS Brisbane, Manuka Oval. Brisbane's slightly struggling. I think GWS win this, but once again, I can see a world where Brisbane get the win. As I said, Port Adelaide, they have the wood over St Kilda. They're the better team of the two. I just can't back against them. So I'll be backing Port Adelaide by 35 in that one. Down in Hobart, North Melbourne v Adelaide. I just don't want a part of this match, to be honest. It might be a tough watch based on what we've seen. North Melbourne you could never back them based on what we've seen. And Adelaide, I mean, they haven't been dreadful. They could have won an extra 1 or 2 games. They weren't great last week, but they nearly won. And technically probably should have had a shot to win it. But we digress. So I'm going Adelaide. Not with confidence, mainly just because North Melbourne look like they're a long way off every team based on what we saw last week. Geelong Carlton, which is probably match of the round. Undefeated Geelong going up against the 5-1 Blues. And it's at the MCG, so I think I'm going to go the Blues in this one at the moment. I've got them on top. It could go either way. This hopefully will live up to the billing of being 2 of the top teams going against each other. Geelong haven't put a foot wrong yet this year, so maybe I will swing my tip. But at the moment, maybe Carlton by 4 points. Fremantle versus the Bulldogs over in Freo. This is another one. Bulldogs was awesome last week, played great football, dominated St Kilda. Freo, on the reverse, looked terrible. They got done by West Coast. So, I've got it. Fremantle. Bulldogs have haven't played Optus Stadium terrible over the years, I don't think. So maybe they're a chance, but at the moment Fremantle, not with confidence. So I know I'm saying that about a lot of games, but the last couple of weeks have scarred me. There's been some rough results. Gold Coast, West Coast. I know West Coast are on a 2-game winning streak, but from what I understand, Harley Reid's not playing this week, and this is a tougher game than they've had. Oh, maybe not. Freo's a tough win for them, but a good win for them. But I think Gold Coast win this. If Gold Coast want any chance of playing finals, they have to win this, and they have to win it comfortably, which I can see them doing. I can see it being probably 10 goals to 4 at half time, and then just staying around that 7-goal margin for most of the second half. The final game of the week is Hawthorn Sydney. Hawthorn finally got their first win of the year last week, but it was against North Melbourne, so I wouldn't be getting too confident with that just yet. Sydney by 25. However, there's just a little hint of a few weeks ago when they lost to Richmond down in Melbourne that might just play on some of the Sydney players' minds, because that was a bad result on a Sunday afternoon, and here we are again Sunday afternoon against one of the lower ranked Victorian teams. But I'll definitely be tipping Sydney. Having said that, I can't see Hawthorn winning this one. So that's the 9 matches. As I've said many times, there will be another episode in 2 days' time, which will be looking at the final 5 matches of the round. So that's from North Melbourne, Adelaide, Geelong, Carlton, Fremantle Bulldogs, Gold Coast, West Coast, and Hawthorn Sydney. We'll be having a full look at them, as well as I'll be having a look at my full player ratings from the season. So we'll have a look at a few of the best players for each club probably, and maybe a little bit more based on up until the end of round 6. So these ANZAC Day games won't count towards my rating system for that episode at least. I do ratings every match, every player. I rate out of 100, and then I get my average. So yeah, we'll be looking at the top few players from each club. Overall, probably the top 20 odd. And yeah, if there's any players you do want to know about, get in touch, comment on the videos, message me on Twitter or on Instagram or on one of my TikToks. I'll probably be doing a few TikToks about ratings as well over the coming week or so. So yeah, feel free to shoot a message if there's someone you're interested in, and I will definitely do my best to let you know what I think of their season so far. But that's everything for this week's not this week's final episode, but this episode at least, episode 17. We'll be back in 2 days for episode 18, final wrap up of the preview for ANZAC Day football. If you're going to a dawn service, enjoy. Remember our ANZACs and what they've done for us, and then sit back and enjoy the football of the weekend, because there's going to be some very good games, and some games that could go either way. So enjoy that. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you on episode 18.